Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Michelle. This is one of my cats, Mr. Plague. He will be joining us. If you caught my last vlog, you know what I'm reading next. You've seen the title. This is my To the Lighthouse reading vlog. I'm very excited. This is my second reread, my third read of this book. Talked a couple times. I have video evidence that To the Lighthouse is not my favorite Woolf. I'm so happy. Not the case this time. I'm so happy I finally get it. I see the hype behind To the Lighthouse. I just finished the first section. I'm hoping as I continue on that I continue to love it. I do know that the first part is my favorite part out of the entire book. The novel really does devolve and it's so sad. And even reading this first section, especially on a reread, knowing what will happen, this video will contain spoilers, but knowing what will happen, you just feel that so much more. I'm surprised by how much of this I remember. It just feels like coming back. Obviously, I have a lot of tabs. Whenever I read Woolf, there are a lot of tabs. Maybe I'll go through my annotation scheme in another video. I want to keep this brief and focused. I want to keep this in line with the other videos that I've been making lately. What have I really noticed on this reread in particular? Very much this tension you find in most of Woolf, if not all of Woolf, between the mundane, the trivial, and greatness. The feeling of oneself and being a failure, the purpose and what it means to create art. You really see this through the characters of Mr. Ramsay and Lily Briscoe. Mr. Ramsay is a philosopher, and there's his famous quote, and he thinks of thought as the alphabet from A to Z, and he makes it to R, but how many men make it past R anyways? And maybe it's okay if you don't make it past R. Maybe being where you are is enough. But he represents wanting to push yourself to the limit, and he's so worried about himself being a failure. We have Lily, and her painting is not taken seriously by various characters in the novel. But she also feels the frustration, the tension, the looking at the canvas and not being able to convey what she wants to say, and that fear of someone seeing it and observing her artwork. There's also so much about memory, similar to the Odyssey and the Tempest. The way that this is told, the mechanism that this is told, it's not a straightforward story. It's almost told through the lens of the future as if it's already past. But something I really noticed, especially in the first couple of pages with the children, is that it's almost like the future is a part of this too. It's not just the past, it's not the present. The future is coming in with all of these ambitions and everything that these kids will be and want to do, what their parents want from them, what they want for themselves, and this feeling to be different. There's really a lot of tension in this novel. There's the famous dinner scene. Mrs. Ramsay, she's compared to the Queen quite often in this section, and she really represents this old Victorian age, and they have this last Victorian dinner, this grand affair, and at the end of it she crosses over the threshold and they're entering into this new modern era. Really just highly recommend you read Woolf, any Woolf book if you haven't already, but a few passages and all of the writing is like this, and it's so beautiful, it's so exquisite, but fitting in with the idea of change. There's a coherence in things, a stability. Something she meant is immune from change and shines out in the face of that flowing, the fleeting, the spectral, like a ruby, so that again tonight she had the feeling she had once today, already of peace, of rest. Of such moments, she thought, the thing is made that endures. That, and I actually had never flagged that before, but I liked this idea of continuity of time, even on this brink, this cusp of change as we leave the Victorians behind. I have to look it up. I don't know where it's from, but this quote recurs. Mrs. Ramsay's reading some poems or some verse. And all the lives we ever lived and all the lives to be are full of trees and changing leaves. Again, just all these tree quotes and how they relate to change. I keep talking about the brothers Karamazov and the sticky leaves. It really reminded me of that. And one final quote from this section. They would, she thought, going on again, however long they lived, come back to this night, this moon, this wind, this house, and to her too. All those quotes, but especially the first one, the last one, I loved this idea of memory as preservation. I am excited to get to the next two sections. They are wrenching. They are much more wrenching than the first, but this is take two because I accidentally had it on time lapse. It's okay, you didn't miss too much. You just missed my cat being all up and rubbing on the camera. Maybe I have some photos I can put in of that. I've never filmed another update so quickly, or at least not recently. As you know, last night I finished part 1. This morning I buzzed through part 2. It is the shortest part. I don't have too much to say about the second section. I would say that it's the part that I remember the most. I think I've mentioned on several occasions the idea of this part is that it's eyeless. There's no self, there's no person. Reading it again this time, I had forgotten that it's also the bridge in between World War I and after World War I. So the war is taking place in this intermittent in-between section. So coming into this after having read the second Montgomery journal where she discusses the war, and there's this particular passage where Montgomery talks about the time before the war and the time after the war, and she says Anne belongs to the time before the war, and these two time periods are completely different and created such a rift. That really added a new layer and a new lens to this section. So I'm excited to get to part 3. If you can see my cat, this is the kind of day we're having. Rainy, sleepy, cloudy. I don't want to disturb him, but I do want to film. I think I'm gonna need to move a bit so that you can see me better. I don't know if you can still see him, but I think this will work a little bit better. With one final update, I did finish part 3. The last update, I was talking about part 2. I think I mentioned this in the first part. If not, I definitely did in the second part. This novel really follows a downward slope for me. And unfortunately, even though I was enjoying this the most on this reread of To the Lighthouse, I did still feel that. The first part of this novel, The Window, is definitely by far the strongest part. There's a couple of reasons for that, and the main one is really Mrs. Ramsay. She's tying everything and everyone together, and it really allows Woolf to explore these deep philosophical thoughts, and I just think it's done so well and it's so strong. The second part I also really love, not quite as much as the first part. That part's called Time Passes. In that part, everything is deteriorating. Everything's falling apart. We have an empty house, the war is happening, and we only get our characters in these inserts in brackets. We find out about Mrs. Ramsay's death in brackets. It's very powerful, it's very wrenching, and I think it's beautifully done. Then we get this last part. For me, this part is just so unsatisfactory. I understand that's a little bit the point. In it, James and Cam are now going with their father as they approach adulthood. They're not quite 18 yet. I think Cam is 17 and James is 16. They are now going to the lighthouse even though they no longer want to go, and especially James no longer has this powerful pull this allure that the Lighthouse has in the first section. It's meant to feel disjointed because Mrs. Ramsey is no longer a character in the novel. She remains a character through death, but she's no longer physically present on this plane. She only exists in memory and irreality. So in this third section, we're relying on the narrative from Lily Briscoe, a young woman who is now well into middle age in this third part. She comes to the summer home and paints. And then we also follow Cam and James, and their sections are split. We follow Mr. Ramsey, McAllister is also on the boat with them. William Banks is there, Carmichael's there. Some of our same characters reappear, but it's really those three, Lily, Cam, and James, that are the main narrators that we're following. Personally, just don't think that they're strong enough to carry the narrative in that same way with Mrs. Ramsey and that great unifying effect. What I love so much about Mrs. Dalloway is that I personally feel like it just keeps getting stronger the further that you go into this story. And the point of Mrs. Dalloway is that everything comes together in the end, and it really does feel like all the notes are playing at the right time to form the right chord. This one, the third section, it feels unfinished, despite the fact that at the very end, Lily finishes her painting. It does feel like a little bit of an unfinished piece for me. And then at the end of the day, I don't know exactly what this book is saying as a whole. I still give it 5 stars. I still love this one. In the past, I've given it 4 stars. For Woolf, I think it's 4 stars, but in terms of just general ranking, yeah, it is 5 stars for me. So sadly, this one is still not my favorite Woolf. I think this was my most enjoyable reread though, and I'm glad that I reread it now. I will also say that reading the third part, I saw a lot in here, which I did not end up rereading this one before I reread The Waves. A lot in here that we get in The Waves, a later work, and I think that that one is a little bit more polished and fleshed out as compared to The Lighthouse. In The Waves, we follow 6 children, and it starts with them quite young, and we follow them into adulthood. And at the end, we get them, I think they're even older than Cam and James are at the end here. Despite all they've gone through, I just think that Cam and James really aren't old enough to properly wrap this up. I think maybe it would help if they were a little bit aged up. And I think that The Waves does a much better job and a much better commentary from these grown-up characters that really gets to that philosophy that I really like. As always, thank you for watching. If you haven't seen it, go check out my vlogs on The Odyssey and The Tempest. I feel like these books have all been really speaking to each other, and I've loved that. But I'm most excited to get to next, which will not be until like tail end of May, beginning of June. I'm finally gonna read Ulysses by James Joyce, and I'm very glad that I reread To the Lighthouse specifically before I dive into that one. And of course, Ulysses is the Romanization, the Roman name of the Odyssey. Ulysses by James Joyce is a very loose retelling of the Odyssey. So I'm glad I've read all of these in preparation. I have a couple of months. I'm waiting because I'm reading it with some friends, which is really exciting. There's a couple other things I'd like to get to before that. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video.